Hi, I'm Vince, and welcome to you and to the people of the Diocese of Rupert.
And I'm Jason. Welcome to the people and congregations of the MNO Synod.
Today we mark Orange Shirt Day as well as the National Truth for Reconciliation Day. And I wanted to just tell you a little story about my grandfather. He was a residential school survivor who came from Cross Lake to the United Church Residential School in Norway House. And he came when he was about 4 years old till he was about 16. And throughout that time, I think he went home perhaps twice, but the rest of the time he stayed there and was basically raised by an institution until he left. And during that time, he never really talked about his experiences in a residential school, which I believe says quite a lot about what was going on with him. And we've heard horrific stories these days coming out of those experiences, and many of those are everywhere, and they're online, they're in books as well. And I don't really need to go over all of the horrific abuse that happened there. But I would think that my grandfather would have experienced all of these himself, because he really was in a lot of pain at the beginning of his life, and also during the time that he was a father. He was raised by an institution that didn't care or that didn't give him love. And therefore he learned that and passed that on to my father, who then passed it on to me. And because of that, I've made sure that I don't pass that on to my son. It needs to end somewhere. But my grandfather really was an amazing man. When I knew him as his grandson, he somehow changed his life and came to know God despite the fact of what the people had done to him, and the people who gave the good news to him or who spoke about the gospel. My grandfather changed when he had to decide for himself whether or not what he heard about the good news of Christ was real, because he had not seen it in the life of those who had spoken about it. So he had to find out for himself, and he did. And he came back saying that, yes, this is true for me. And because of that, it changed his life in a very significant way. He became an amazing, amazing man, so much so, like I always say to people, that I thought, when I was a child, that I thought that he could walk on water if he wanted to. And he taught me a lot, and he taught our community a lot, and he was there for me and for, seems like, everyone else in his life and within our community. Every September 30, I often think about my grandfather. I often think about what might have been with him when he was growing up in the residential school. But I also think about what could have been with me and with my family if he never left the residential school. That is, if one of these sheeps in wolf clothing had actually taken him and murdered him and had buried him in an unmarked grave, as we are hearing so much about had happened these days. I think about him not being alive, and I am very grateful that by God's grace that he was able to make it home, because I would have missed out so much. I wouldn't have been born, mind you, but we all would have missed out on the man that he was, getting to know him as an elder and as a Christian elder specifically. And but it also, September 30 always makes me thankful, because there I need to, for myself, need to thank God for him, to remember him, to make sure that I, as a leader in the church, ensure that none of that ever happens to children again.
Thanks, Vince, for sharing those stories. It is so important for us to hear the stories, the experience of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. Certainly stories that I was never taught growing up. Certainly stories that have now been coming out more so, and a chance for us to learn and reflect on those. As we get closer to September 30th, I wonder too, we've all been told to wear orange shirts, and I hope that we do that. But Vince, I'm wondering if you can tell me, where does Orange Shirt Day come from?
Orange Shirt Day started in 2013, and it was started by Phyllis Wapstad, who went to residential school one day and with an orange shirt that her grandmother had brought for her. And when she got there, the people took it away from her. And so that was the time that she remembered from her childhood. And so 13 years ago, she started to write about that and to talk about it. And that's how it started. And it's a time for remembrance. It's a time to remember the Indigenous people, the Indigenous children that went to residential schools, and especially the ones that didn't make it home.
Certainly a hard story to hear, but it does remind us of why it is so important to work at reconciliation. And within the church, as people of faith, we are called by Christ to be people of reconciliation in the world. Part of our calling through our baptism is to be reconciled to our brothers and sisters, all of our brothers and sisters together. And so I hope that as we mark this day for the first time as a national day, that we are able to reflect on that and to practice that reconciliation. So this September 30th, and just before, both Vince and I are encouraging all of us as people of the Diocese of Rupert's Land and of the MNO Synod to educate ourselves, to learn more about some of the history and some of the things that we can do about that. Both of our churches have provided resources, and you can find those on the Anglican Church of Canada website and on the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada website, as well as some resources on the MNO Synod website. We point to some events that are happening, but we also want to lift up the voices and the resources that come from our Indigenous communities. The National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, the Treaty Commissioner's Office, and others. And don't forget, APTN and CBC will be doing a spotlight highlighting some of the issues that we are called to reflect on and to work at this September 30th. And most importantly, and I think maybe the easiest thing that we can do, is to put on an orange shirt on September 30th. Any orange shirt will do. If you don't have one, or if you would prefer to get the official one, please look for an Indigenous supplier or manufacturer. You can find them in Winnipeg and hopefully in your local community. On behalf of Vince and I want to say blessings to you in this work of reconciliation.